It's time now for the news review of this bulletin. The United Nations warns against a new U.S. border enforcement plan, saying it risks undermining the basic foundations of international human rights and refugee law. The UN Rights Chief Volker Turk says the right to seek asylum exists regardless of origins, immigration status, or how a person got to the border. Turk called for the rights of refugees and migrants to be respected and protected at international borders. The Human Rights Office says that even before the expansion of Title 42, the U.S. used the measure over 2.5 million times to expel people without the rightful due process. Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden announced a new plan to expand a controversial pandemic-era border restriction called Title 42. The plan allows fast-track expulsion of some 30,000 Venezuelan, Haitian, Cuban, and Nicaraguan migrants to Mexico each month. From Washington, D.C., Colin Campbell joins us to give us an update on this piece of news. And Don DeBar is an activist and commentator joining us from Austin, New York, to let us know his thoughts. All right, Colin, first over to you. Tell us what happened before Biden made that trip in terms of Title 42, and then where things stand now regarding what the UN has said is what's being enacted goes against the UN Charter.
Yeah, well, this is a very controversial visit because the Republicans, of course, the president's rivals, have wanted him to visit the border for quite a bit of time. This is his first time visiting the border, and he did not even really meet with migrants. And so even though he did visit finally, this is still a point of consternation for those authorities at the border and, of course, officials and lawmakers who legislate in that area. Saying that the president isn't doing enough. And of course, now that a decision has been made, this is still a controversial decision for the United Nations, which is looking at U.S. policies, because there have been a number of policies that the United Nations has looked at that has made the decision that the U.S. may not be acting in the most civil of ways or the most humanitarian of ways towards other people that are coming into the country.
Don DeBar, when you take a look at this through your activism lens, how do you see the way that the U.S. is treating this whole issue? Of course, if possible, if you can incorporate the way that these migrants actually do, once they make it into the country, do at some point, if their status gets legalized, but even if not, the contributions that they actually make to the American society in terms of its economy.
Well, let's start, first of all, with the fact that everybody involved that we're talking about are human beings with human rights. Okay, and then most of the people that we hear from on either side of it on the ground here are people that are aggrieved by the current situation. On the one hand, there are the people who've been driven from their homes by U.S. foreign policy to such desperation that they leave their homes and their country to go somewhere that's saying openly in the world, we don't want you, because it's better than where they are, because of the conditions created by U.S. foreign policy. On the other hand, the people here are facing a deterioration of their own conditions. It's a natural result of increasing the number of workers per job as mechanization and other austerity measures basically decrease the number of jobs. So it drives wages down, it drives unemployment up, people competing for services that are declining, et cetera. What we're looking at is class warfare in multiple dimensions. First, there's U.S. foreign policy, which goes around the world and basically walks into a place, points a gun at the people, says, go bring your stuff and put it on our boat, and they leave. And those people are either driven from their homes in the process by warfare, bombings, et cetera, or they leave to follow their stuff to where it's been stolen, the same way you would follow the guy that stole your TV set down the street to try to get it back. Only it's obviously much more important. Their food, the things that sustain life. That is the foreign policy. First, creates huge numbers of refugees. For example, Syria alone, 13 million people displaced with the U.S. war there over the last 12 years. Then you have the contact at the border, basically, where despite the tug of war politically between the Democrats and Republicans, you have conditions that people living in a police state would find oppressive. And there's a filtering process that involves all kinds of human trading and worse. at the border. People die in the process. When they come here, the people that are workers don't have any rights. They're not citizens, and so they can be super exploited, and they have very little recourse. And then finally, you have a divided working class here at each other's throats, while the people making the policy walk off to the bank with the profit. It is class warfare in multiple dimensions.
Colin, can you tell us a little bit about what came out of this visit by Biden to Mexico in terms of this issue?
Well, when you look at what the administration wants to do is they want to have a orderly way in which migrants are coming into the country. And that's why Title 42 has been very controversial. This is something that was initiated during the Trump administration and that has been continued now in the Biden administration, where you have a number of migrants coming from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Honduras, Nicaragua, up to 30,000 a month. And what the president has said is that these people that are trying to come into the country can do so legally if they are able to demonstrate that they can find a sponsor, if they can afford a plane ticket to come in, and they do so legally. And so that's where things stand right now. But of course, the humanitarian crisis at the border is of the utmost concern as well. And many lawmakers don't feel that the president is addressing that robustly enough, especially those looking from the United Nations and looking at human rights from the United Nations are thinking that the U.S. is frankly not doing enough, and that this has been a crisis that has been lasting for months now. We saw images coming from the border when we saw Haitians trying to make it into the U.S., when it seemed that law enforcement officials were trying to rope in or use ropes to try to wrangle in migrants coming from Haiti. Although they say that was a mischaracterization of what their actual job duties were, the visuals were very stunning. And that made a lot of lawmakers upset. And we're saying that the U.S. again was showing an inhumane way in dealing with the migrants. So right now, the administration is seemingly trying to find a balance between trying to be effective, but also not trying to be inhumane. And they're not doing either very effectively from what lawmakers are saying and from what the public opinion seems to be.
And do you think that's going to improve at all, Don DeBar?
Well, no. I mean, it depends on what you mean by improve. We're talking about form rather than substance here. The substance is as I just described it. You have to discern between people fleeing a fascist coup in Honduras when the U.S. Arranged that, and say Juan Guaido, who becomes a refugee from Venezuela with a pension. These are the things that are being adjusted, on the ground and behind the scenes. The rest of it is for public consumption here. So we argue with each other over things that are akin to rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Thank you very much. We're going to end it there. Don DeBar, activist and commentator. Colin Campbell, thank you so much for talking to us there from Washington, D.C. And with that, we come to an end for this news review. Thanks for tuning in.